I'm Ashley, 28, and for years I saved every penny to buy my dream car. A 2019 Ford Mustang GT. Cars have been my passion since childhood. But last year, I returned from a business trip to discover my parents had sold my car to bail out my sister Brooke's college tuition. The betrayal cut deep, but they had no idea what was coming. By the time I was done, they'd regret ever touching my keys. Before I dive into this family drama, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of people who stand up for themselves. Growing up in a middle-class family in Dearborn, Michigan meant cars were practically in my blood. The roar of engines from the nearby Ford plant was the soundtrack to my childhood. While other kids had posters of pop stars, my bedroom walls were plastered with Mustangs, Challengers, and Corvettes. My most treasured possession was a faded photograph of my grandfather leaning against his cherry-red 1967 Mustang, a confident smile on his face. Grandpa James was my hero. When I was 8, he'd let me sit on his lap in his garage while he tinkered with engines, patiently explaining each component. "This carburetor is like the car's lungs," he'd say, holding up greasy parts for my wide-eyed inspection. "And this distributor is like its brain." By 12, I could name every part of an engine. By 15, I could help him rebuild one. "Cars aren't just transportation, Ashley," Grandpa would say, his hands stained with motor oil. "They're freedom, independence, the physical manifestation of American ingenuity." When he passed away when I was 16, he left me his toolbox, a heavy, metal testament to our bond and the knowledge he'd shared. My sister Brooke couldn't have been more different. 2 years younger, she was the social butterfly to my mechanical bee. While I was under the hood of Grandpa's old truck, Brooke was at the mall with friends, maxing out the emergency credit card Mom had given her, just in case. Where I saved birthday money, Brooke spent hers before the candles on her cake cooled. Our parents, Michael and Karen Miller, treated us differently from the start. With me, they were strict. Curfews were non-negotiable, allowance was tied to chores, and financial responsibility was drilled into me like the multiplication tables. "Ashley's so responsible," they'd tell relatives. "She's our rock." Brooke, however, lived by different rules. Her tearful apologies after overspending were met with sighs and bailouts. Her missed curfews earned gentle reminders rather than the groundings I received. "Brooke's still finding herself," they'd explain. "She needs more flexibility." College showed our divergent paths even more clearly. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing mornings at a local diner, administrative work on campus in the afternoons, and weekend shifts at an auto parts store where I got a discount on supplies for my car projects. I graduated with no debt, a feat that took military-grade budgeting and countless missed parties. Brooke attended a more expensive private college, changing majors 3 times in 2 years. Her Instagram showed spring breaks in Cancun and weekend trips to Chicago, while mine showed the rebuilt motorcycle I'd rescued from a junkyard. Somehow, her education never seemed to include the value of $1. Through it all, one dream kept me going: owning a Mustang GT. Not just any car, a sapphire blue 2019 model with the performance package, 6-speed manual transmission, and the growling 5.0-liter V8 engine. For 5 years after college, while building my career in architectural project management, I saved. No vacations. No expensive clothes. No lavish dinners. Every bonus, tax refund, and side gig dollar went into my Mustang fund. The day I finally had enough saved, $42,000, I felt like I'd won the lottery. I spent weeks researching dealers, negotiating prices, and comparing options. When I finally found her, yes, her, in a dealership 2 states away, I took a day off work and made the journey. The moment the keys touched my palm, tears sprang to my eyes. Years of sacrifice, crystallized in metal and leather. I named her Sapphire. Childish, perhaps, but she was more than transportation. She represented every extra shift, every passed-up vacation, every moment of delayed gratification. For 2 years, I cared for her meticulously, premium gas only, scheduled maintenance performed early, hand washes even in Michigan's brutal winters. My apartment was nothing special, a one-bedroom unit in a decent but unremarkable complex about 20 minutes from my parents' house, but my parking spot held a slice of automotive perfection. I visited my parents every week for Sunday dinners, often driving them around in Sapphire, beaming as Dad complimented the engine's rumble or Mom admired the leather seats. Sometimes I'd catch Brooke rolling her eyes when I declined going out because I needed to change Sapphire's oil or detail her interior. "It's just a car," she'd say, not understanding that to me, Sapphire was the physical embodiment of my independence, discipline, and achievement. If only I'd understood then how little my pride and joy meant to the rest of my family. But I was about to find out in the most painful way possible. The Seattle business trip came as a surprise. My firm needed someone to oversee a challenging project for 2 weeks, and my boss picked me, citing my attention to detail and reliability. The timing wasn't ideal. Early April meant unpredictable spring weather in Michigan, and I worried about leaving Sapphire exposed to potential hailstorms in my apartment's uncovered parking. "Why not leave the car at our house?" Dad suggested during Sunday dinner the weekend before my departure. "We've got room in the garage. She'll be safe and sound." The offer seemed perfect. Mom and Dad's two-car garage had an empty space since Mom's latest fender bender had left her Toyota in the shop. I drafted detailed instructions. Don't let the fuel level drop below half a tank. Don't park her outside even temporarily, and absolutely no one but Dad should drive her, and then only to start her up once every 3 days to keep the battery charged. "You act like we're babysitting a child, not a car," Mom laughed, but Dad nodded solemnly. "I've got this, sweetheart," he promised. "Text me anytime you want an update." Seattle kept me busier than expected. 12-hour days solving construction crises left little time for worry, but I still texted Dad every evening. Day 3. "How's Sapphire doing?" "Dad, sleeping like a baby in the garage. Started her up today. Purrs like a kitten." Day 7. "Everything still good with the car?" "Dad, right where you left her. No worries." Day 10. "Did you start Sapphire today?" "Dad, all taken care of. Stop worrying." Day 12. "Flying home tomorrow. Can't wait to see my girl." "Dad, safe travels. We'll see you tomorrow." Something about his last text felt off. No mention of the car. No joke about Sapphire missing me. Just generic. But exhaustion from the project and packing for an early flight pushed the thought aside. My flight landed at Detroit Metro at 11:30 a.m. By 12:45, I was pulling into my parents' driveway, eager to retrieve Sapphire and head home for a long shower and longer nap. The garage door was closed. I rang the doorbell, overnight bag still in hand. Mom opened the door, her smile too bright, eyes not quite meeting mine. "Ashley, you're earlier than we expected. Come in, come in. Dad's just popped out to get some groceries." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something was wrong. "I'll just grab my car and head home," I said, moving toward the garage door in the kitchen. "Why don't you sit down first? Have some coffee?" Mom's voice had the same high pitch it got when she was hiding something. Like the time she'd accidentally shrunk my favorite sweater in the dryer. I pushed past her and opened the garage door. The empty space where Sapphire should have been gaped like a missing tooth. "Where's my car?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Mom wrung her hands. "Your father should really be the one to." "Where's my car?" I rarely shouted, but panic was rising in my throat like bile. The front door opened. Dad walked in, groceryless, clearly having been called by Mom. "Ashley," he started, his expression grave. "There's been a situation." The next 10 minutes blur in my memory, fragments of a nightmare. Words floated around me. Brooke's tuition, overdue, expulsion warning, no choice, family emergency. "You sold my car." I finally managed, my voice cracking. "Without asking me? Without even telling me?" "We tried to call you," Mom insisted. "Your phone went straight to voicemail." "I was in meetings all day." "You could have left a message." "Sent an email." "Waited 1 day for me to call back." My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Dad looked pained but resolute. "Brooke was going to be kicked out of college, Ashley. They were giving her 48 hours to pay the outstanding tuition or clear out her dorm. $35,000. We didn't have it. So you stole my CR? Something I spent years saving for. The betrayal was so profound I could physically feel it, like a knife between my ribs. Technically, Dad said quietly, the car was on our property. Because you offered to keep it safe for me. Hot tears were streaming down my face now. We know you're upset, Mom said, reaching for my hand. I jerked away. But you're stable. You have a good job. Brooke's future was at stake. What about my future? My dreams? My property? I was nearly hyperventilating. Dad had the decency to look ashamed. The buyer gave us $28,000. It was the best we could do on short notice. Another blow. Sapphire was worth at least $38,000. You didn't even get fair market value. It was an emergency, Mom repeated defensively. We didn't have time to shop around. My phone buzzed. A text from Brooke. OMG, did Mom tell you what happened? So embarrassing, but thank you guys for saving me. Love you. I showed the screen to my parents. She doesn't even know, does she? That you sold MY car without MY permission to bail her out again. It's just a car, Ashley, Mom said, her tone turning frustrated. It can be replaced. Family comes first. That phrase, family comes first, something they'd repeated throughout my childhood whenever they asked me to accommodate Brooke's needs, triggered something deep and primal. Clearly MY place in this family doesn't count, I said, voice suddenly cold. Clearly MY sacrifices, my property, my feelings are disposable. That's not fair, Dad protested. We've always been proud of how responsible you are. Responsible enough that you feel entitled to take what's mine? To decide what I can lose so Brooke doesn't have to face consequences. My phone buzzed again. Brooke was calling. I answered on speaker. Ashley, you're back. Thanks for letting Mom and Dad use your car fund for my tuition. I was seriously about to be homeless. Her voice was light, almost casual, as if discussing borrowed lunch money. They didn't use my car fund, Brooke. They sold my actual car. The one parked in their garage. Without asking me. A pause. Oh. Well, that sucks, but I'm sure they'll help you get another one, right, guys? The sheer audacity, the complete lack of understanding of what had been taken from me, was the final straw. I grabbed my bag, still packed from the trip. I have to go, I said flatly. Ashley, please, Mom called as I headed for the door. Don't leave like this. We're family. I turned back one last time. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family respects each other's sacrifices. I need to not be here right now. I walked out, called a rideshare, and sat on the curb, letting the betrayal wash over me in waves. In the space of 30 minutes, I'd lost not only my dream car but my faith in the people I trusted most. The first night in my apartment without Sapphire was the hardest. The emptiness of my designated parking space mirrored the hollow feeling in my chest. I laid in bed scrolling through photos on my phone, Sapphire gleaming after her first wash, Sapphire at sunset with the mountains behind her from a rare day trip, Sapphire's dashboard on the morning I hit 10,000 miles. Each image was a twist of the knife. I could still smell the leather interior, feel the perfect grip of the steering wheel, hear the engine's growl when I accelerated onto the highway. Sapphire wasn't just transportation, she was freedom, accomplishment, proof that hard work and sacrifice eventually paid off. Except they hadn't. In the end, my years of careful saving meant nothing when weighed against Brooke's immediate crisis. My phone kept buzzing with texts from my parents. Mom, we know you're upset, but please understand we had no choice. Dad, call us when you've calmed down. We can discuss replacing your car. Mom. Brooke feels terrible. She wants to talk to you. I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there to say? Thanks for showing me exactly where I stand in the family hierarchy. After calling in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, I spent the day in a fog, alternating between rage and despair. My friend Kimberly came over with takeout and listened as I poured out the whole story. I can't believe they did that, she said, genuinely shocked. That's not just inconsiderate, it's actually theft. The worst part, I said, pushing rice around my container, is that they don't even understand what they did. Mom called it just a car as if I was throwing a tantrum over a broken toy. Kimberly's outrage was validating, but it couldn't fill the void. Neither could the well-meaning text from my boss assuring me I could take another day if needed, or the funny cat videos my coworker Taylor sent to cheer me up. Later that evening, scrolling mindlessly through social media to numb the pain, I was slapped in the face by Brooke's latest post, a smiling selfie in front of her dorm with the caption, "So grateful for my amazing family always coming through for me. #blessed #family first." The casual entitlement, the complete lack of awareness about the sacrifice that had been made on her behalf, not willingly by me, but taken from me, made my blood boil. I nearly threw my phone across the room. Instead, I called Justin, a friend from college who had become a lawyer. When I explained the situation, his side told me everything. Technically, since the car was on their property, and I'm assuming the title was in your name alone, he asked. Yes, it was my car, completely paid off, title in my name. Well, they committed conversion. Essentially, they wrongfully took control of your property. You could sue them in civil court. Hope flickered briefly. But Justin continued, it would mean taking your parents to court. Even if you won, which you probably would, the damage to your relationship might be irreparable. And civil cases can drag on for months or years. The hope dimmed. Could I really sue my own parents? Create a legal battle that would rip our family apart even further? And meanwhile, Sapphire would still be gone, in the hands of whoever had bought her. The following days blurred together. I returned to work but functioned on autopilot. Friends invited me out, but the thought of socializing felt exhausting. My parents left voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to listen to. Brooke sent texts that oscillated between defensive, "I didn't ask them to sell your car specifically," and dismissive, "Can't you just get another one?" A week after discovering the theft, I hit rock bottom. Sitting on my couch in the same sweatpants I'd worn for 3 days, surrounded by takeout containers, I realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize. This wasn't me, the responsible, resilient Ashley who took pride in solving problems rather than wallowing in them. Almost mechanically, I went to my closet and pulled out Grandpa James's old toolbox. I hadn't opened it in months, but something drew me to it now. The familiar smell of metal and motor oil hit me as I lifted the lid. There, tucked inside the top tray, was a folded piece of paper I'd forgotten about, a note Grandpa had written me before he died. "Ashley," it read in his shaky handwriting, "tools are only as good as the hands that hold them. And the strongest tool you'll ever have is in your head. When life throws a wrench in your plans, you've got 2 choices: throw it back and get nowhere, or use it to build something new. I've never known you to back down from a challenge. Don't start now. Love, Grandpa." I ran my fingers over the words, feeling something shift inside me. Grandpa was right. I could continue drowning in hurt and betrayal, or I could find a way to fix this, not just for myself, but for my family. Because the current dynamic was broken, had been broken for years. Maybe this theft was just the most extreme symptom of a deeper problem. For the first time in days, I felt the fog begin to lift. I might not be able to get Sapphire back, but I could ensure that everyone involved understood the weight of what had happened and make sure it never happened again. I showered, changed into fresh clothes, and sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook. It was time to stop being a victim and start being a strategist. With clean clothes, a clear head, and a renewed sense of purpose, I began my research. If I was going to address this situation effectively, I needed facts, not just feelings. First, I needed to understand exactly what had happened with Brooke's tuition. I texted my cousin Melissa, who attended the same university and had classes with Brooke. "Hey Mel, weird question, but do you know what happened with Brooke's tuition issue? The one last week." Melissa's response came quickly, "You don't know? She lost her scholarship after winter semester. Her GPA dropped below the requirement. She's been freaking out about it for months." Months. Not a sudden emergency as my parents had implied. I dug deeper, asking carefully worded questions that wouldn't reveal my intentions. Through conversations with Melissa and mutual friends, a disturbing picture emerged. Brooke had known since January that her scholarship was in jeopardy due to poor grades. Rather than buckling down academically or getting a job to cover the anticipated tuition gap, she'd gone on a spring break trip to Miami, bought a new MacBook Pro, and shopped extensively for interview clothes for internships she never actually applied for. Her Instagram told the story her words didn't. Designer sunglasses in South Beach, bottle service at clubs, a hotel suite with ocean views. All while knowing she couldn't pay her tuition. The 48-hour emergency my parents cited was actually the final notice after multiple warnings from the university's financial aid office. Warnings Brooke had ignored, assuming someone would bail her out. And someone had. Me, involuntarily. I found myself oscillating between renewed anger and cold determination. This wasn't just about my car anymore. It was about a pattern of behavior that had been reinforced for years. Brooke created crises, my parents rescued her, and the cycle continued. Meanwhile, I worked hard, made sacrifices, and had my achievements taken for granted or, in this case, taken from me entirely. It had to stop. But how? Civil court, as Justin had explained, would be messy, expensive, and potentially devastating to family relationships. A screaming confrontation might feel temporarily satisfying, but would likely result in defensive posturing rather than understanding or change. What I needed was leverage, a way to make everyone involved feel the weight of their actions while creating a path forward. The idea came to me while reviewing my car insurance policy, which I'd need to cancel. The terms compensation, depreciation, and replacement value jumped out at me. What if I treated the theft of my car not as a family betrayal, but as a financial transaction? Not an emotional wound, but a business arrangement gone wrong? I called Nathan, a financial advisor I'd consulted when setting up my retirement accounts. I need to create a formal loan agreement, I explained after outlining the situation. Interesting approach, he said. Rather than viewing it as theft, you're retroactively converting it to a loan. Legally, it's questionable since the transaction occurred without your consent, but as a family resolution strategy. He paused. It might work, especially if you're willing to accept the agreement as settlement. We spent the next hour discussing terms, principal amount, interest rate, payment schedule, collateral, and consequences of default. Nathan recommended being firm, but not punitive, an interest rate that reflected the seriousness of the situation without being exploitative, a payment schedule that was challenging but achievable. The goal isn't to bankrupt your sister, he reminded me. It's to create accountability. By the end of our conversation, I had a draft agreement. The principal would be $38,000, the actual market value of Sapphire, not the $28,000 my parents had received. The interest rate would be 6%, higher than a typical auto loan to reflect the involuntary nature of the arrangement, but lower than credit card debt. The term would be 5 years of monthly payments. Early payment would be allowed without penalty. There would also be a clause offering an alternative. If Brooke could locate and purchase an identical Mustang GT in equivalent or better condition within 30 days, the loan would be considered satisfied. That night, I role-played the upcoming confrontation with Kimberly, who did an eerily accurate impression of Brooke's defensive whine and my mother's guilt-inducing sighs. We rehearsed counterarguments to the inevitable pushback. It was an emergency created by months of irresponsibility and enabled by years of bailouts. Family helps each other. Help builds capability. Bailouts build dependency. We'll replace your car eventually. My property was taken without consent. This isn't about eventual replacement, it's about immediate accountability. You're being selfish. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Expecting others to repeatedly sacrifice for your mistakes is. I drafted talking points and practiced them until they flowed naturally. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about acknowledging harm, taking responsibility, and creating consequences that would lead to growth. It was about changing an unhealthy family dynamic that benefited no one in the long run. Not me, not my parents, and certainly not Brooke. I carefully considered timing and location. A public place would prevent the loudest confrontations, but might limit honest expression. My apartment would give me home field advantage, but might feel like an ambush. My parents' house had the weight of family history, but could unconsciously reinforce existing power dynamics. In the end, I chose Sunday dinner at my parents' house, our traditional family gathering time. It was neutral territory with the weight of routine. Everyone would be present, relatively relaxed, and the setting would reinforce the family bonds that I wanted to preserve, even as I challenged the dysfunctional patterns within them. The night before the confrontation, I reviewed the loan agreement one final time, printed 3 copies, and placed them in a professional-looking folder. I laid out my outfit, not power suit intimidating, but neat, adult, and serious. I rehearsed my points once more, then tried to sleep. Morning came with a strange calm. Whatever happened next would be difficult, but necessary. For the first time since discovering Sapphire's disappearance, I felt not just angry or hurt, but purposeful. I wasn't just reacting to a wound, I was creating a solution. As I drove to my parents' house in my rented Toyota, a pale shadow of Sapphire, I felt Grandpa James would have been proud. I was using the tools at my disposal to build something new from the wreckage of what had been broken. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a tradition since I moved into my own apartment. Usually, I arrived early to help Mom with cooking, but today I deliberately timed my entrance for 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before our usual 6 p.m. meal. Not so late as to seem rude, but late enough to avoid the comfortable routine of chopping vegetables side by side with Mom, which might blunt my resolve. When I pulled up in the rental car, I took a deep breath, checking my appearance in the rearview mirror. Professional, calm, determined. The folder with the loan agreements sat on the passenger seat like a silent ally. Dad opened the door before I could ring the bell. "Ashley, we weren't sure you'd come." The relief in his voice was palpable, and for a moment, my determination wavered. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, worry lines creasing his forehead. "I said I would," I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I stepped inside. The familiar smell of Mom's pot roast filled the house. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile was tentative. "It's good to see you, sweetheart. We've been so worried." I noticed they were both careful not to mention the car or my abrupt departure during our last encounter. Typical conflict avoidance, act normal and hope the problem disappears. "Is Brooke coming?" I asked, placing the folder on the entryway table. "She should be here any minute," Mom said. "She's running a bit late. School project." I nodded, following them into the kitchen where I accepted a glass of water but declined the wine Dad offered. I needed full clarity tonight. 20 minutes later, we were seated at the dining table, minus Brooke. Mom had just started serving when we heard the front door open. Sorry, Brooke called, bustling in with her typical whirlwind energy. Group meeting ran late, and then traffic was insane. She dropped her bag, kissed Mom's cheek, and slid into her chair across from me. "Oh, hey Ashley. Good to see you." Her casual greeting, as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't been appended, confirmed I'd made the right decision. Dinner proceeded with strained normality. Mom and Dad carried most of the conversation, discussing neighbors, relatives, and Dad's upcoming retirement plans. I answered direct questions, but otherwise remained quiet, observing. Brooke chatted animatedly about classes, friends, and a professor who totally has it out for her. As we finished the main course, Mom rose to clear plates. "I'll get dessert ready." "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "before dessert, there's something we need to discuss." I stood and walked to the entryway, retrieving the folder. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Dad's shoulders tensed, Mom froze halfway to the kitchen, and Brooke looked confused. "What's going on?" Brooke asked, looking between our parents and me. I returned to the table and sat down. "We need to talk about my car. The one that was sold without my knowledge or consent to pay for your tuition." Brooke's eyes widened. "Oh, that?" She glanced at our parents. "I thought that was all sorted out." "Nothing is sorted out," I replied evenly. "My property was taken from me. That needs to be addressed." "Ashley," Mom began, her voice taking on the placating tone I'd anticipated. "We've already explained it was an emergency situation." "We had no choice." "There's always a choice," I countered. "And in this case, the choice was made to sacrifice my property rather than have Brooke face the consequences of her actions." "What's that supposed to mean?" Brooke's defensive tone emerged right on cue. I kept my focus steady. "It means I know the full story. This wasn't a sudden emergency. You lost your scholarship months ago due to poor grades." You received multiple warnings about unpaid tuition. Instead of addressing the problem, you spent money on spring break, shopping, and partying. Brooke's face flushed. You've been spying on me. I've been gathering facts. Facts you and our parents left out when explaining why my car was sold. Dad cleared his throat. Regardless of how the situation developed, we did what we thought was necessary at the time. We're your parents, Ashley. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions. Decisions about your own property, sure. Not about mine. I opened the folder and placed a copy of the agreement in front of each of them. Since my car was taken without my consent and used to financially benefit Brooke, I'm proposing a formal arrangement to make things right. What is this? Mom asked, skimming the document. A loan agreement. It converts the theft of my car into a retroactive loan from me to Brooke in the amount of $38,000, the actual market value of my Mustang, not the $28,000 you accepted. Loan agreement. Brooke sputtered. I can't afford to pay back $38,000. Actually, you can, I said calmly. The payment schedule extends over 5 years. It's structured similarly to a car loan, which is essentially what this is, except the car was taken, not purchased, and the loan was made without the lender's consent. This is ridiculous, Mom said, pushing the paper away. We're family, not business associates. Exactly, I replied. Family should respect each other's boundaries and property. Family shouldn't take from one member to bail out another without consent. So what, you're punishing Brooke because we made a decision? Dad's voice rose slightly. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm establishing accountability. The agreement includes an alternative. Brooke can locate and purchase an identical Mustang in equivalent condition within 30 days, and the loan will be considered satisfied. In 30 days? That's impossible. Brooke protested. It wasn't impossible for me. I saved for 5 years, researched for weeks, and found exactly what I wanted. You have the advantage of the $28,000 already in hand and only need to find $10,000 more, presumably from the same parents who were willing to sell my car for your tuition. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Mom tried a different angle. Ashley, honey, I understand you're hurt. But is this really how you want to handle it? With formal contracts and payment schedules? We're your family. We love you. I love you too, I said, feeling the emotion rise in my throat, but pushing through. That's why this is so painful. And that's why I'm doing this. Because our family dynamic needs to change. Brooke creates crises, you and Dad bail her out, and the cycle continues. Meanwhile, I work hard, make sacrifices, and have my achievements taken for granted or taken from me entirely. Brooke started crying, a familiar sight at family confrontations. So I'm just a screw-up, is that it? And you're so perfect. This isn't about perfect versus screw-up, I said firmly. It's about actions and consequences. Your actions led to lost tuition. Instead of facing that consequence, my car was taken. Now I'm establishing a new consequence that restores what was taken from me. Dad leaned forward, his expression serious. And what if we refuse to sign this agreement? I'd prepared for this question. Then I'll have to reconsider my relationship with this family. I can't continue in a dynamic where my boundaries mean nothing and my property isn't respected. You'd cut us off over a car. Mom looked stricken. Not over a car, I corrected. Over a fundamental breach of trust and respect. Over the clear message that my sacrifices and accomplishments are less important than protecting Brooke from the consequences of her choices. That's not true. Dad protested. Isn't it? When have you ever sold something of Brooke's to solve my problems? When have you ever expected her to sacrifice for me? Their silence was answer enough. Brooke had moved from tears to anger. This is so unfair. I didn't ask them to sell your stupid car. No, but you created the situation that led to it. And you benefited from it. Now you have the opportunity to make it right. By bankrupting me for the next 5 years. By taking responsibility. The monthly payments are manageable with a part-time job and careful budgeting. Something I've been doing since I was 16. The argument continued, cycling through the predictable stages: denial, deflection, guilt-tripping, anger. My parents tried to negotiate terms. Brooke vacillated between tearful apologies and indignant accusations. But I held firm, countering each objection with the calm, factual responses I'd practiced. As the evening wore on, I could see the realization dawning that I was serious, that this wasn't a temporary outburst of anger, but a carefully considered position from which I wouldn't be budged. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of exhausting emotional exchange, I stood up. I've said what I came to say. The agreement is fair and addresses the harm done. You have 1 week to decide. If you choose not to sign, I'll understand that as a statement about how you value me and my place in this family, and I'll act accordingly. I gathered my things, leaving copies of the agreement on the table. At the door, I turned back one last time. I love you all. That hasn't changed. But love without respect and boundaries isn't healthy for any of us. As I drove away in the rental car, emotionally drained but strangely calm, I realized that the ball was now in their court. I had done what I could to address the situation constructively. The rest was up to them. The week following the confrontation was the longest of my life. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to keep my mind occupied. Each evening, I checked my phone, half expecting to see messages from my family. But there was only silence. On Wednesday, I received a text from Dad. "We need to talk about your proposal. Can we meet?" I suggested Saturday morning at a neutral coffee shop. Better to have this conversation on fresh ground, away from the emotional weight of the house where I'd grown up. When Saturday came, I arrived early, securing a quiet corner table. Dad appeared first, looking tired but resolute. Mom followed a few minutes later. "No, Brooke." "She's coming," Mom said, noticing my glance at the empty fourth chair. She had to find parking. We ordered coffee and made stilted small talk about the weather until Brooke arrived, sliding into her seat with uncharacteristic quietness. Dad cleared his throat. "We've discussed your agreement. We understand you're hurt and angry." "This isn't about hurt or anger," I interrupted gently. "It's about accountability and changing patterns that aren't working for any of us." "Let me finish," Dad said, surprising me with his firmness. "We've realized that you're right about some things. We have treated you and Brooke differently. We've expected more from you and less from her. That wasn't fair." Mom reached across the table for my hand. "We thought we were helping Brooke by solving her problems. But maybe we've been making things worse in the long run." I hadn't expected this level of self-reflection. Thank you for acknowledging that." Brooke stared into her coffee. "I talked to my academic advisor," she said quietly, "about why I lost my scholarship. He said I've been expecting other people to fix my messes for too long." The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the defensive sister I'd braced myself to face. "So here's what we're proposing," Dad continued, pulling out his own copy of the agreement, marked with notes. "We accept the principal amount of $38,000. That's fair. It's what your car was worth. But we'd like to discuss the interest rate and payment schedule." We spent the next hour negotiating terms. In the end, we agreed to a 5% interest rate and a 6-year payment schedule instead of 5, with the condition that Brooke would take financial counseling courses at her university. "There's one more thing," Brooke said as we prepared to sign the revised agreement. "I want to know why this car meant so much to you." "Really understand, I mean." The question surprised me. "Because I worked for it," I said after a moment. Every extra shift, every skipped vacation, every time I repaired my old car instead of replacing it, it all went toward that goal. When I finally bought Sapphire, it wasn't just a vehicle. It was proof that hard work and sacrifice eventually pay off. Brooke nodded slowly. "I've never really worked for anything that way. Not long term." "Maybe that's part of the problem," I suggested gently. We signed the agreement there in the coffee shop, with the barista and a regular customer serving as witnesses. It felt strange and formal, but also significant, a turning point in our family dynamic. The first few months were rocky. Brooke struggled to make the initial payments, even with the extended schedule. She complained about having to take a job at the campus bookstore and cut back on social activities. But she made each payment, albeit sometimes at the last possible moment. By the 6-month mark, something had shifted. Brooke got a second part-time job as a research assistant for one of her professors. Her grades improved. She called me one evening with evident pride in her voice. "I've made 6 payments now," she said. "And I'm putting a little extra aside each month toward the principal." "That's great," I replied, genuinely impressed. "It feels different. Earning something. Being responsible for it." Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents was healing gradually. Sunday dinners resumed, though with a new dynamic. They asked about my financial goals and career plans with fresh interest. They spoke of Brooke's challenges with more nuance, acknowledging both her struggles and her capacity to overcome them. Dad helped me research replacement cars, respecting my budget constraints and priorities rather than pushing me toward cheaper options as he might have once done. Mom stopped making jokes about my obsession with cars and started asking questions about why I valued certain features or models. 10 months after the agreement was signed, I found another Mustang GT, midnight blue rather than sapphire, but with lower mileage and the same performance package. It wasn't sapphire, but as I drove it off the lot, I felt a similar sense of accomplishment. This car, too, represented hard work and persistence, but also something new, the courage to stand up for myself and establish boundaries, even with those I loved most. A year and a half into the payment schedule, Brooke invited me to coffee. She seemed nervous as she slid a folder across the table to me. "What's this?" I asked. "I got an internship," she explained. "A real one with the architectural firm downtown. It pays well, really well. And I've been saving." She gestured toward the folder. "Open it." Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. "I wanted to make a lump sum payment toward the principal," she said. "I calculated the amortization schedule myself." I looked up, genuinely impressed. "You did?" She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Turns out I'm not bad at finance when I actually try. The academic advisor got me into this financial literacy program, and..." She shrugged. "I kind of love it. Might minor in business." I pushed the check back toward her. "Use it to build your emergency fund first. Then make extra payments if you still want to. You're not mad." "Why would I be mad about you being financially responsible?" That was the whole point. 2 years after the confrontation, our family gathered for Thanksgiving. As we helped Mom in the kitchen, Brooke nudged me. "Remember when we were kids and I always got out of drying the dishes?" I laughed. "You'd suddenly have homework the moment the plates needed drying." "I was such a brat," she admitted. "But you know what? I'm actually grateful for that loan agreement now." She lowered her voice so our parents couldn't hear. "It's the first time anyone really held me accountable. Made me realize I could handle more than I thought." Later that evening, as we finished dessert, Dad cleared his throat with unusual formality. "I want to say something," he began. 2 years ago, your mother and I made a terrible mistake. We violated Ashley's trust and took something precious from her." He looked at me, his eyes sincere. "We were wrong. And while we can't undo that, I want you both to know that we've learned from it. About respect, about consequences, and about treating both our daughters with the same expectations and consideration." Mom wiped away a tear. "We're so proud of both of you. Ashley, for having the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it was difficult. And Brooke, for accepting responsibility and growing from it." Brooke reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. It wasn't a perfect resolution. The car I'd saved so long for was still gone forever. But something better had taken its place, a healthier family dynamic based on mutual respect rather than established roles and patterns. As I drove home in my midnight blue Mustang GT that night, I thought about how sometimes losing what you love most can lead to gaining something you need more. I'd lost Sapphire, but I'd gained a more balanced relationship with my family and a sister who was finally growing into her potential. And that was worth more than any car, even one with a 5.0-liter V8 engine and the perfect 6-speed manual transmission. 3 years have passed since that fateful day I returned from Seattle to find my dream car gone. In that time, so much has changed, not just in my family, but in how I view relationships, boundaries, and even material possessions. My midnight blue Mustang GT, which I named Luna, has become more than a replacement for Sapphire. She represents not just my financial discipline but my emotional growth. Every time I slide behind the wheel, I'm reminded that I had the courage to stand up for myself, even when it meant challenging the people I love most. Brooke graduates next month with a double major in communications and business finance, a combination no one would have predicted 3 years ago. She's maintained a 3.7 GPA for the past 2 years and already has a job lined up with a marketing firm. Most importantly, she hasn't asked our parents for money once since signing the loan agreement. She still makes her monthly payments without fail. Sometimes they arrive with little notes. Only 24 more to go, or extra $100 toward principal this month. Got a bonus at work. What started as an obligation has become a point of pride for her, tangible proof that she can commit to something difficult and follow through. Our parents have changed too. Last year, when Brooke's car needed major repairs, they offered her a loan rather than a gift, complete with a payment schedule and modest interest. She accepted gratefully, understanding the respect inherent in being treated like a capable adult rather than a child needing rescue. Mom called me after that exchange, sounding thoughtful. You know, for years we thought we were helping Brooke by solving her problems. But we were really just telling her we didn't think she could handle life on her own. That's exactly it, I agreed, touched by her insight. We did the opposite with you, she continued. Expected you to handle everything yourself, without support. That wasn't fair either. It was the most perceptive observation Mom had ever made about our family dynamics, and it helped heal a wound I hadn't fully acknowledged. Dad has become more reflective as well. On a recent fishing trip, something we'd started doing monthly as a way to reconnect, he confessed that selling my car had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about his parenting. I always thought being a good father meant protecting my kids from hardship, he said as we sat waiting for a bite. With Brooke, that meant stepping in to fix things. With you, it meant pushing you to be strong and independent. He cast his line with practiced ease. I never realized I was giving you both exactly what you didn't need. These conversations would have been impossible 3 years ago, when unspoken patterns and expectations governed our interactions. The painful catalyst of losing Sapphire ultimately created space for more honest, balanced relationships. As for the loan, Brooke has approximately 2 years of payments remaining. Last Christmas, she surprised all of us by announcing she'd received a performance bonus and wanted to pay off a significant chunk of the principal. The pride in her voice as she explained how she'd budgeted for this lump sum payment brought tears to Mom's eyes. I never thought I'd say this, Brooke told me later, but there's something really satisfying about paying your own way. About knowing you've earned what you have. I smiled, recognizing the same satisfaction I'd felt when purchasing Sapphire after years of saving. Welcome to financial responsibility. The entry fee is steep, but the membership benefits are worth it. She laughed, then grew serious. You know, I resented you at first. Thought you were being petty and vindictive with that loan agreement. And now? Now I think it might be the best thing anyone's ever done for me. It's like, for the first time in my life, someone believed I could handle consequences instead of needing to be rescued from them. Those words encapsulate the most important lesson from this whole experience. True support isn't about removing obstacles from someone's path. It's about believing they have the strength to overcome them. The formal loan agreement, which once felt so cold and businesslike in the context of family relations, turned out to be an instrument of respect. It acknowledged harm done, established clear expectations for making amends, and treated both parties as capable adults rather than perpetual parent and child. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something more balanced and authentic. We still have our differences, but now we address them directly rather than falling into old patterns. They ask before borrowing my things, even small items, a sign they've internalized the importance of boundaries. And I've learned to ask for help sometimes, recognizing that independence doesn't have to mean isolation. Perhaps most surprising is my relationship with Brooke. The sister who once seemed like my polar opposite has become a friend and ally. We still approach life differently. She'll always be more spontaneous. I'll always be more planned. But we've developed a mutual respect that was missing before. She consults me about financial decisions, and I turn to her for advice on social situations. Our strengths complement rather than conflict. Would I choose to lose Sapphire again if I knew all these positive changes would result? That's a complicated question. The pain of that betrayal was real and deep. But the growth that emerged from it has been transformative for our entire family. What I know for certain is that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean cutting people off. Sometimes it means offering them a different way to be in relationship with you, one based on mutual respect rather than established patterns. Sometimes the hardest people to establish boundaries with are those we love most, precisely because we fear losing that love. But boundaries built on honest communication can actually strengthen bonds rather than severing them. As I park Luna in my driveway, my own driveway now, attached to the small house I purchased last year, I run my hand along her sleek hood and reflect on how objects can carry meaning far beyond their practical function. Sapphire represented my independence. Luna represents my growth. And the agreement still pinned to Brooke's bulletin board represents a turning point for our family. The moment we began to relate to each other as the people we truly are, rather than the roles we'd always played. I often wonder where Sapphire is now, whether her new owner appreciates her power and beauty. But then I start Luna's engine, feel that familiar rumble, and focus on the road ahead rather than the one behind. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family? Did it change your relationships for better or worse? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics, and share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves, even when it's difficult. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful growth. Thanks for coming along on this journey with me, and I'll see you in the next video.